Welcome, this is Ed Pozzuoli, President of Tripp Scott, and with another webcast with the Florida presidential primary quickly approaching on March 15th. Today we're honored to have Dr. Brenda Snipes, the election supervisor for Broward County. Doctor, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me.
So with the presidential primary quickly approaching, what do voters need to know?
Well, voters need to know that there are three ways that they can vote. They can vote early by requesting an absentee ballot from us. We'll send it out immediately. They can vote early, and early voting starts on March 5th, runs for 9 days at 20 different locations, or they can go to the polls on election day. So that's really important. And they'll just need to get themselves ready, have an idea of who they want to vote for, and recognize that this is an election primarily for party members, Democrats or Republicans.
So let's just emphasize that point. This is what's called a closed primary. And what does that mean to our viewers?
Closed primary simply means that in this election, the majority of the voters are going to be casting a vote along party lines. If they're a member of the Republican Party, then they have an opportunity to vote for the Republican candidates who are on the ballot. If they're a member of the Democratic Party, they have to vote that way. If they have claimed no party since they registered to vote, then they will not be able to participate in the party nominations. However, there are 5 cities who are voting, then there will be items for the NPAs. And all of this information is on our website. We try to keep it full of information so that a person can go through these details in the amount of time that's necessary for them.
So let's be certain about something I want to make sure our viewers understand. If you're not registered, if you're registered a Republican, you'll only be able to vote or have the option to vote in the Republican presidential primary.
That's exactly correct.
Okay, and if you're a Democrat, you'll only have the option to vote in the Democratic primary.
Exactly.
But if you're an independent or something other than a Republican or a Democrat, you will not have the ability to either vote in the Republican primary or the Democratic primary.
That's exactly true, unless you live in one of those 5 cities that are going to be voting. There will be some local city issues, municipal issues, but otherwise, if you're straight Democrat, Republican, you cannot vote. There won't be anything on the ballot for someone who is an NPA in the cities that are not.
Right.
That
Other than the down ballot issues, but in the presidential primaries, you have to be registered a Republican or a Democrat to vote in those respective primaries.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay.
And the other thing I think voters need to know too is that in both of the parties, there were folks who suspended their candidacy. However, their names are still going to appear on the ballot. And some voters are asking, well, why is that the case? That's because when the ballot design was created, all of these individuals were active and participating fully in the election process. But some have dropped out along the way, not withdrawn. If they withdrew, we could put up notices to say that this candidate has withdrawn. Since they suspended their campaign, that means they may decide to pick it up at any time and continue as an active candidate. But since they haven't, then all of those names are going to appear on the ballot. And voters need to be listening to the to media outlets every day to find out who is still participating.
So as an example, I've requested an absentee ballot. It's sitting on my counter at home to fill out, and it still has the full list of names on the ballot. And as an example, our former Governor Jeb Bush has now, I think he quote unquote suspended his campaign.
He did.
But his name's still on the ballot. Mm-hmm. Now, what if I decided to vote for Jeb Bush?
If you decide to vote for Jeb Bush, then that vote is not going to, it will count. We'll probably show it, but it's not going to have any bearing on the outcome of the election because he has suspended his candidacy.
So with respect to voter integrity and election results to make sure they're tried and true, what steps have you all taken to make sure the results that we get at the end of the evening that we can have full and complete confidence in?
Well, we just finished our public test yesterday. It's called the Logic and Accuracy Test. And actually what happens is we create a script and pre-vote ballots, and we have a record of this script.
As a test?
That's a test. It's a test. And so we, during the actual logic and accuracy test, we run these ballots across several machines, and we expect for the results that we get to be in accordance with the script that we have written. So that's just the last thing that we did.
So that checks your internal
That
computer
checks
programming
the
and
internal
accounting.
operation of the systems.
Okay.
But then we also have to verify signatures on the absentee ballots that come in. So we'll have a team of people who are doing that, but they've all been trained in signature verification. So we don't just take a group in and say, sit right here, see if these signatures match. They actually have been through a training component, and many of our permanent staff have been through several classes over the years so that they have some sense of skill and be able to actually critically identify whether there's a match or not.
How does the process work around absentee ballots? And I submit my absentee ballot, and then I go to my polling place and try to vote. How does your office manage that?
You're absolutely not going to be able to do that.
Not going to do that.
Not. Because our office invested in some great technology a number of years ago, and one of them is the electronic voter identification system, which it allows us to have access to the live database throughout the time we're in an early voting site or throughout the time we're out on election day.
So it's live.
It's live. So if you have voted and your ballot has been processed through our system, when you come in to vote at an early voting site, it's going to say that you already voted. And if you argue with us and say, oh, but I know I didn't vote and must have been someone else, then we will offer you a provisional ballot, which means that we're going to go back and double check the record.
And you got to figure that later. Mm-hmm. But you only count once.
You only count once. And if someone drops off a ballot for another person, they have to actually sign that ballot into our office. They can't just drop it in a box and go. They have to sign it in so we know who brought that ballot in.
Let's work backwards from the date of election. What do voters need to bring to their polling place?
Every voter needs to bring a picture ID with signature. Most often that's the driver's license. Then secondarily they may bring a passport or a state issued ID or student card from their university or high school. So there are lots of options that are available to the voter, and again, they can go to our website. Everything is spelled out there. We just sent out sample ballots, so the sample ballot will have a listing of everything that's available as a signature.
So the
ID.
same goes at early voting sites, the same
Exactly.
picture ID.
Exactly.
Now, with respect to absentees, explain to our viewers how they make sure, if they're going to vote absentee, what do they have to do to make sure they comply with the rules?
What we ask voters to do is read the instructions entirely on the envelope that's enclosed in the absentee ballot mailer. We have it in English, Spanish, and Creole. And we've also put on a big red X where the signature should be applied. If a ballot comes in without a signature, then we're going to have to notify that voter. We've chosen to do that in Broward. We'll notify the voter and say that we don't have a signature on your absentee ballot return envelope. So we need you to sign this affidavit, give us a signature, we'll check with the signature on file. If we're unable to reach that voter, then that ballot cannot be counted.
Okay, so
it must have a signature.
So it's important that on the outside of the envelope, not on the ballot itself, but on the outside envelope that they submit, they put their ballot in.
They must sign that ballot. And the other thing is that makes it really convenient for voters is that the postage is prepaid by our office this year. So if a person wants to vote absentee, stay at home, just drop it in the box, not give it to anybody to transport for them, then the postage is already prepaid.
Now, Dr. Snipes, this presidential election has caused a lot of energy on both sides of the aisle.
Yes.
Have you seen increased new registration for voters?
I think so. I'm just seeing a lot more energy, and we're getting a lot more calls, a lot more inquiries about this election. It's a little bit more active than some we've had previously, so I think we could have a decent turnout, and more young people are getting energized. We just, as I mentioned earlier, had a high school voter registration drive where we registered almost 14,000 young people. Wow. So we're hoping that we're going to turn that into voting. They do work with us. So they handle our call centers and they handle our equipment, and we're really pleased about that.
As we approach this election, and as obviously people are already voting, but as we go through election night, I wish you and your staff and your team of volunteers well. and so that we have no mishaps and accurate vote totals, and how would I say it, a early evening of results.
Well, we want an early evening, but we want an accurate
want it
evening
accurately.
more so than we want an early evening.
You know what? On that note, I want to thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for
Dr.
having
Snipes,
me.
thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.